Well, hello, friends. I'm sitting here just a few days before Christmas and wondering what message to bring to you downstairs. I'm in the church, and downstairs all the food is being sorted out twice as much as usual for any given day because everyone's due to come in for the very final shopping day tomorrow. The question I want to ask you is, what is going to be the biggest challenge of 2021? Will it be Brexit? Look at that, queues at the Port of Dover. Massive lorry queues. Will it be the challenge of coronavirus? We've just discovered this new variant, mutation of coronavirus, which is suddenly making the curve go up very steeply because it's so much more infectious than the last version. So is that going to be the biggest challenge of 2021, overcoming? Is the problem that we have an ageing congregation and that we need to do something to bring young people into our church? I want to suggest to you that the biggest challenge of 2021 is that people are lost. Actually, it's the same challenge of 2020 and 2019. At the end of our passage that we read about Zacchaeus, Jesus summarizes his mission. He says, "The Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost, or those who were lost." Towards the end of 2020, I read this book by Peter Cotterill, who has been a one-time principal of London Bible College as well as a missionary for many years in Ethiopia. His book was called Mission and Meaninglessness, and it's subtitled Good News in a World of Suffering and Disorder. And he has his own way of describing this sense of lostness that we read about in Zacchaeus' story there. It says, "The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." For many of us, the word lost is perhaps a theological word. We imagine that we know what it means because it's Christian jargon. It's somehow about them over there. It's certainly not about us over here. But what does it really mean, lostness? The word, Cotterill uses various words, but disorder is one of the words he uses. And he refers to a chap called Macquarie, who uses 4 tensions to describe the human predicament, this sense of disorder that we all have. The first is the gap between what we can imagine and what is real. We can imagine a better world, can't we? We find ourselves frustrated that things aren't what they could be, that it's not fair, it's not right, it's not just. Things should not be this way. There's a gap between what we can imagine in our heads, the bright utopian ideal that we can imagine, and what the reality we find ourselves confronted with. Then there's the gap between the rational and the irrational. Cotterill gives the example of a woman whose husband is a rapist, but she chooses not to reveal this despite knowing the enormous damage that her decision to protect her husband will eventually have on the community. So many of us behave in ways which are not rational. The thing we do is the very thing that doesn't make sense. And then there's the gap between the community and the individual. One of the things that Trevor refers to in his book, how can I be an individual yet remain truly connected to another? Sometimes these things just seem impossible. I can have things, I can make my own decisions, I can take hold of my own life and find myself completely isolated from other people, or I can be thoroughly mixed up with the community, with socially engaged, fellowship and friendship and family, and find I can never make any choices for myself. And the challenge of existence partly is to overcome that sense of dissonance that comes from this tension between me as an individual, being myself, and being well connected to others. And so often we find ourselves unable to bridge the gulf. The final tension is between what he calls responsibility and impotence or powerlessness. And he tells a story from Ethiopia, how in Addis Ababa in the 1970s there was only one hospital for the mentally sick in all Ethiopia. A country nearly twice the size of Texas and 5 times the size of the United Kingdom. All over the country, the mentally sick are untreated. If they become violent, the common treatment was to tie the sick person to the centre pole of his hut, and there he lived out his life. Something that was possible to do something about it, but there's somehow a lack of responsibility and a decision, really, to not exercise power, not to make a difference. These are quite deep, descriptive ways of the disorder that is in society. And that story of Zacchaeus, it's a beautiful story, it's a wonderful story. It starts with Zacchaeus saying that, explaining that Zacchaeus can't see Jesus, and so he climbs up a tree. And in that wonderful way that the New Testament writers have, Luke gently in the background is saying Zacchaeus couldn't see. He couldn't see. And at the end of this story, it seems that Zacchaeus ends up being able to see very well indeed, so well about what is truly going on that it affects his bank account, it affects his whole material world and his existence and his social relationships. There's a transformation that takes place. He who is lost is now found, or as Jesus says, he's now a son of Abraham, not just having Abraham's blood flowing through his veins, but having Abraham's faith flowing through his head and his heart, and having the insight to see what the world is and how he can actually have a place in this world. And as we go into 2021, we need to see clearly. Of course, we are deeply affected in all sorts of ways by the things I mentioned earlier, coronavirus, the uncertainties of Brexit, and indeed our future as a church. But these are not the biggest challenges. The biggest challenges are the challenge that Jesus articulates, which is the challenge to face a lost world, to seek and to save the lost, to help people see well. This is why we as a church come together each year and we express our commitment to one another through our covenant. We ourselves are part of this lost world. We're not free from these tensions, from this sense of disorder, from this sense of lostness, but we are the people who are being saved. We are the people who are on the way from Egypt to the promised land. I'm not there yet, as Martin Luther King says, but we are being saved. Yes, we have been saved from the guilt of sin, but we are being saved from the power of sin and the power of this lostness, this sense of disorder. And we are increasingly the ones who are able to see the world in its beauty, to see the world as it can be. And yes, we are being taken forward to the promised land, to the bright future with the King of Kings, with whom we have the privilege of living in all eternity. But in the meantime, we have a mission. In the meantime, we have our sleeves to roll up, to express our solidarity together as a group of people, ordinary people whom God has called together in community to make a difference. So we're going to just look now at the words of the covenant, just to look quietly at them And there'll be space for us to reflect, consider, and then just echo these words in our own hearts.